Okay, well, no video, I guess. So we're just gonna go from
It didn't
here.
count down.
Hey,
And we're
it
live.
didn't
Are we
count
recording
down.
or are we live?
We're
Are we?
recording.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
okay. It says live
yeah.
here. So, wow, we're
It does
here.
say live. Yes. Well, see, look, technical difficulties. I feel like we need a
Yeah,
screen that says that. But
we'll
hey,
fix
welcome
it
to
in
Telling the
post.
Show.
Welcome to Telling the Show. What episode is this, D?
10.
I think this is 10. Episode 10. We're 10 episodes in. Wow.
We're 10 episodes in, yes.
We're a couple of episodes away from being like a standard streaming season, assuming one exists. And we're a different kind of podcast. We're the kind of folks that we are folks that are just like our listeners, struggling to break into the industry or to find or navigate our way in to be storytelling entertainers, whether we come from screenwriting or any other profession along the way. I'm Chris Moore, and
I'm Denise Seiler. So today we're going to be talking to Carrie Height, who I must confess is an old friend. Not like old as an age, but old as in we've known each other for a little bit. He's an amazing actor. He's got a voice like caramel, and he's also a producer. And we're going to be talking about a couple of things today. Some things that I actually was not aware of, and I'm really excited that we're bringing this to our listeners. So we're going to be talking about like alternative media, like, voiceover and that sort of storytelling genre. But we're also going to be talking about HBCUs and what that is and how that is going to be affecting our entertainment industry in the years to come, hopefully. And we're also going to talk to Carrie about the trend of all-inclusive casting, which is something we've touched on in the past, but we definitely need to delve into it further. But Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about Carrie?
Well, I'm happy to. He's a producer, actor, and voiceover artist, and more specifically, he is a SAG-AFTRA / AEA actor. He recently, again, Carrie, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on this. He was a nominee as Best Actor in a Thriller for Chronicles of the Good Reverend. So you actually can see some examples of his work at www.carryhite.com. That's CARYHITE.com. So you can learn even more about him than we're just touching on here. So
yeah, hey Carrie, how's it going?
In terms of
good.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? I was like,
these were
we're
so
just going to talk
Chris.
about
Say
you.
hello.
These are all real things that you mentioned. Yes.
Okay. So before we delve into our super serious topics, we get to have a little fun first. We do a segment called Logline Thunderdome. Basically, two log lines enter, only one makes it out. And I'm super excited because now we have an intro to our segment. So you are the first one to have this intro.
Nice.
Okay. Let me get this all going here. I promise it's going to be awesome. Oh. It was everything we hoped it would be, right?
I love it. I loved it.
10 seconds of fun I whipped up a couple of weeks ago.
So do you want to go first, Chris? Who wants to go first?
Yeah. Well, I'll go first. I have absolutely no hope of actually putting this forth unless you've got a logline, Carrie, and you want to throw one out there to make it more interesting.
I mean,
it's
I
usually
don't
just
have
me and
one
Denise.
loaded up, but I'm thinking right now.
Okay.
You're welcome to, but usually we make our guests the judge.
Okay.
And so the way this works is I'll say one, Denise will say one, and you have to tell us which one is the most effective of the log lines. So
Perfect.
cool. Typically we also mention whether it's a feature or narrative, but we don't provide a title because there is a twist this time. Dee, you want to tell what the twist is?
I do. We are getting into the holiday season. So these are log lines from some of our favorite holiday themed movies.
Okay. Got it.
And so now we're about to find out who takes the gold belt in the ring. So actually, I think in the spirit of the holidays, and because I'm normally I try to be the most polite person I can, especially more so in the holiday season. Denise, why don't you go first?
Oh, sure. I'll keep my crown. Um,
Humble brag.
okay.
She
After
thinks
a
we're tied right
oh no,
now.
I know, we are tied. I give it to you. Okay, ready? After a
Ready.
divorced New York mother hires a nice old man to play Santa Claus at Macy's, she is startled by his claim to be the genuine article. When his sanity is questioned, a lawyer defends him in court by arguing that he is not mistaken.
I'm intrigued.
Mhm.
All right.
It's for me, it's such a dark log line
Well,
for the movie that it is, but you know.
Right.
I mean, you started
I think we
off
all
with
know.
this.
It's Miracle on 34th Street, the original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And they were talking about, to think about this, they were talking about divorce way back then when they were encouraging
Yes.
people to stay married forever. Huh.
Yes. And like mental health back in,
Right, because that opened in the 40s, right?
it was in the 40s, yeah.
I thought it was even earlier. I thought it was like 34th Street. Huh.
I don't know.
think it was
We can look it up.
Huh.
You guys discuss. I will find out.
So,
Right. I mean,
I would say that was pretty
Go right ahead,
controversial
Carrie.
for the time. That was controversial for the time.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, it's covering a whole lot of ground, but I think they were just from a screenplay perspective that, automatically creates instant sympathy because you've got a divorcee, single mother, mental health issues, bringing it up around the holidays when things are the most sensitive. I mean, just from a screenplay perspective, I could see how that could get some instantaneous like heartstrings pulled.
Interestingly enough, it was released on May 2nd in 1947.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it wasn't even released around the holidays, but I guess that's a modern construct. So I don't think
they just put it out when they got it done.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
yeah,
May.
and
Let's
like
go see a
tentpole
Christmas
dates,
movie.
right? And tentpole dates weren't a thing back then, but I also would venture to guess the same could be arguably true for Die Hard. It opened in the summer of '88, and it's a Christmas movie in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Well, it was also the summer blockbuster,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the early days of the summer blockbuster.
Okay, Chris, what's
fair
your
to say.
logline entry?
Why, thank you. Okay, this one may not be instantly recognizable in terms of title, and I'm happy to tell you when it is, but this is a feature as well. A widowed family advice columnist raising his 3 daughters alone attends Thanksgiving at his parents', where he meets and swiftly falls for a charming woman. But when she's revealed to be the new girlfriend of his brother, he must navigate, there's a missing word there, he must navigate a different way to balance his family with his feelings.
Oh,
Wow, it sounds familiar.
I can't remember the name, but I know the players. I think I'm thinking of the same movie.
Yeah, I got no clue.
It's Dan in Real Life with Steve Carell and the ever so charming Juliette Binoche.
Oh, nice.
I didn't realize that was a Christmas movie.
It's not. It's a Thanksgiving movie because it's set at Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Everybody forgets Thanksgiving's a holiday. I don't know what that is.
Well, because it just jumps straight to Christmas.
I'm working,
Right.
so it's just another day for me.
Really.
Right.
With more food.
I actually like your log line. I think it gives you like the complete story. It makes you go, hey, I want to read more. I actually like yours better than mine.
Oh,
Thank you.
I know.
Look at the sportsmanship here.
Well, and the question is, which one is the more effective, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard because I think they're both very effective this time.
I do think they're both very effective. And if we're going holiday, I don't I think that because so many people skip over Thanksgiving and they're so Christmas focused, I think the people would lean toward Miracle on 34th Street.
Woohoo! Don't groan. You know I'm a winner.
Yeah, you forgot I'm one too, but
for movie watching sake, I mean, I'm deeply intrigued of the Thanksgiving log line that you have given us.
yeah, I appreciate that. And if I thought I could pepper it with the poster, which basically has Steve Carell side face down in a stack of pancakes, and thought that would help,
If I saw that, then you would definitely have won. I need the visual on that one.
So I need to put together a script book that has that poster right up front, or an artist rendering of it as such.
Yeah, if you provided the visual, you'd have had it.
There you go. And film is a visual medium, so there you go.
That's right.
I'm just saying I'm winning. That's all.
See, that's what. See, there's some psychological stuff going on with Denise and her need to win. Sometimes.
I'm glad that this game can unearth these things.
This is a safe space.
It brings out the best in something. I have no idea what, though.
And while we're while we're uncovering and packing our emotional baggage,
as writers tend to do.
Yes, right. I've been super interested in learning more about these alternative forms of media. Like our previous guest had it was like a digital story, I guess you would call it. And he told stories like live. They were like live radio plays, except they're, for a modern audience. And they were so cool. I mean, like Red Riding Hoods is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm biased because the guy who wrote it's a good friend of mine, David Carouse. But the element of the fact that it's audio fiction this is a big deal, because if you're a new screenwriter trying to break in, this is a way to do it without having the expense of having cameras and visuals. But the work is harder because you have to paint a picture with just sound, and that's a whole different ball of wax to try to do. I mean, and National Public Radio has done it for years. There's a great recording of the Star Wars trilogy, the original one, as produced, and some of the original actors were involved. Nowadays, the Austin Film Festival actually has a contest category for audio fiction screenplays.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, and every year they increase how many people enter into that particular category.
That is awesome.
And another way to get your work out there is something that I've personally been working on, is to make a novel of a story that you've had, and then get somebody to record it. Because then you have intellectual property, and that's sometimes easier picked up than just trying to sell a black and white script. But it takes a lot of talent and skill to make a black and white script into something that's a living, breathing novel that somebody wants to turn the pages on.
I've actually have a colleague who he's a screenwriter, and he was saying how it was easier these days. He had a script, and it wasn't getting any traction, and then he turned the script into a novel, and then once he did that, all of a sudden people wanted to buy the movie rights. So even though he had a script previously. So I mean, it's just a very interesting way on how people view. It's like they want to be the one to source your material and then come up with the brilliant script, even though you create the world.
Yeah, and we've been told that by guests in the past, get your intellectual property out there, because there are entire departments of studios that's all they do is troll for new intellectual property that they can get the rights to. So
right, and it's an axiom out there that for every book you see sold on newsstands, what's in a newsstand? or for every book you see sold on Amazon or offered on Amazon or anywhere, more than likely the rights have already been snatched up. I used to read how when Michael Crichton would have his books out there that they already had, like, the rights to them were already bought by a studio.
Mm.
Right. I feel like that's
Of course,
probably
this was
the
years
same
ago,
for,
and so that shows how much.
I feel like this is the same for James Patterson or someone like that. Yeah.
And you actually did some voiceover for an audiobook of one of James Patterson's novels. Was that correct?
That is correct. Actually, fun fact, it just came out today.
Oh, yay! Woohoo!
Nice.
Yeah.
Congrats.
It's called Fear No Evil. It's an Alex Cross story. I believe it's book 29 in the Alex Cross series, which they've turned into a few movies. I believe Morgan Freeman played the character on film, and I know Tyler Perry played him one time.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. My mom is a huge James Patterson fan, and she actually listens to the audiobook, so she's gonna freak out when I say, "Hey, I know who that is." That's really cool.
Right.
I'm gonna talk to her later.
Nice. Yeah. I just did that. This what was that? Maybe I think I did that in September. Yep. In my
So there is still like a long process of like post-production on those?
So what generally happens, well, it's been an interesting 20 months, let's say. Because I had to convert my closet into what I now call my recording chamber. So that entailed getting some equipment, microphone, interface, as you well know, and then going on YouTube to find out how to soundproof my closet. So I did that, and then having directors or publishers call in and having a session, via Source Connect or Zoom, and doing it that way as opposed to going into the studio and working with an engineer directly. So it's been quite the process. But once all the audio files are given over to the editors, they have to proof it, make sure there's no mistakes made. If it's clean, they clean up all the audio, take breaths out and all the extraneous noise, and then they master the file so it's all the audio's just level, all the sound is level, and then they get it out. And so it could be a 3-week. I mean, like, really, you're looking at a month process. But if they're pressing, I mean, they could get it turned around in about 2.5, 3 weeks.
And is that different from pre-pandemic? Was it a different process?
Well, just being in the studio, I personally like going to studios and working with engineers because that is your first audience member. So,
right.
And so sometimes as I'm going along, maybe I'm not seeing something, and the engineer, it'll catch their ear and they hear it in a way that I didn't. And then, we collaborate right there on the spot and fix it, or, whatever it takes to enhance or bolster the story. That's what they're there for. So that's great. Like, for me, that's great. So doing it by myself for so long now, it was a different feel. And so at first I was taking a very long time to do it because I was second and third and fifth guessing everything. That's not, I don't know. But then you have to get to a point where you can't be that precious and trust in your skill level, and
right.
And then just go with it. And if something comes back funky, those who are in charge of overseeing that will let you know, and then you'll make the necessary adjustments.
Yeah, that's really cool. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I used to supervise and sometimes be on talent or on mic talent for And I'm really giving the best example of my ability right here, right now. But I used to supervise those kinds of recordings, both direct and be the talent for training courses sometime back. And I went to Dallas Audio and Post, which was the studio I'd go to. And what you were describing is exactly what it felt like for me. And me being a sort of technical person, although I try not to be on this podcast, I have the wherewithal to do that. There's a lot of post-production, everything you're talking about in terms of cleaning out the breaths, all the clicks, the pops, and having to, get rid of all that stuff with software. That, to me, that's no problem, because I tend to be a gearhead for that kind of thing. But I would imagine that it's this whole other world for you opening up, and that it had some barrier to entry, especially if you're doing that over the internet with giving them direction live. Was there ever a point where it was just record and then send them something and get notes back?
I mean, yeah, that's basically what I do. That's been the majority of it. I'd say I've worked with a director in these past 20 months, maybe, let's say if I've done 50 projects, I've worked with a director maybe 10 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm mostly self-direct. And again, they trust the performers, by and large. I've been doing this for some time now, but I mean, but they will get back if there's like a little funky read, but they're mostly just checking for noises, any mistakes, but also as a narrator, you're also wearing an editor hat too, because you're not always getting a perfect manuscript. So there will be grammatical errors. There sometimes the wrong character will be named in a sentence. And you're like, and if you're following along, if you're connected to the story, that is not the right character that they just said. And then you wonder if they really actually had an editor go through the entire book, because that's an easy catch. So yeah, I've had to play editor. Most narrators have to. All narrators will at some point. And since sometimes those will get bounced back as corrections, and then you have to explain to them, no, I'm the one who corrected this because this was wrong in the story. And so that's an interesting journey. So
yeah, I could imagine the discussion being a little bit challenging, talking to the folks there, especially I'm sure with the author having some sort of editor. One of the people I follow from a writer perspective, and Denise, I don't know if you follow him as well, and I believe it's Stephen Pressfield. Thank you. I was blanking on the name for half a second. That's not a good moment right in the middle of a podcast. But Stephen Pressfield talks about how to, in this world, to be your own editor, because nowadays everyone's self-publishing, the E.L. James of the world for something like 50 Shades of Grey. And I would imagine that if they start, having, audiobooks recorded of their work, you tend to find that self-published folks haven't done as much editing. So you probably would have come across something like that on a more regular basis, having to do the editing work on that end. It's like they should probably give you a kickback for being the editor of the book in a way.
You are preaching to the choir. I've been saying that for years.
Well, maybe that's a new drinking game. Go back to the idea of a voiceover artist drinking game.
Right.
So basically, you're in all essence, you're like the storyteller that's recording the story, because if something doesn't make sense and it comes across your radar, if you don't make that change, then the story it
won't make sense. Yeah.
It won't work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not the what was his name? Anchorman. Yeah. Ron Burgundy. Yeah. I won't just read what's on the teleprompter. I make sure it makes sense first. Because ultimately, the writer, the author, their name is on the paperback or the hardcover. My name is on the audiobook. So if they're listening to me and it hits your ear funky and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, that mistake will fall on me. They'll think that I messed it up, because there's no way that the writer got it that wrong. But
Right.
if it's hard to, I'd say it's rather impossible to proof your own work, that much of your own work. Yes, you can proof a letter, that's fine. But to proof 300, 400 pages of your own work, that's just not good business. So,
well, it's not easy. I'll tell you, from the screenwriting perspective. I mean, the beautiful part is now table reads are a big deal for people. Being able to organize one among people,
yes,
sometimes that becomes a good proofread on
that's a
multiple
beautiful
levels.
proofread. Agreed.
It is. It's also an embarrassing one if you're just like, oh my God, how bad is my script? Because you're really doing proofs on several passes. You want to do, I used to try to do all at once, and found out that was so schizophrenic and headache inducing that from a screenwriting perspective, it's like you really want to do one at a time, just to make it easier for yourself, and get the spelling one out of the way, then the grammatical one, and hopefully the story one you've been doing. You've created those processes for yourself to be able to find those things, so that you don't end up frustrating the people further downstream, because unlike in the situation you described, everyone blames the writer one way or another.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, after so many passes, though, you kind of get cross-eyed. And so you in your head that David is the one who crossed the street, but what you've written down is Jason has crossed the street. You know the right thing, but you just, after so many passages, everything just kind of runs together. So it's always helpful. And I think table reads are a great way to get fresh eyes on it. So people could just point out these just little things that were just, that could be a huge error, but it wasn't, it's just because your eyes glanced over it, because you were so in the story and you know it so well that your eye just passed over that mistake.
I don't want to, sell my own goods on my podcast, but that's actually what I do. I set up table reads for screenwriters. So if you have a script and you're listening and you have a script, reach out to me, because that's what I do. I set up table reads with professional actors, and they will read it out for you. We do it on a recording, so you can refer back to it later. It's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And now the floodgates are going to open in the business.
That's fine. That's fine.
You're gonna have 200 scripts.
That's great. I'll take them all.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, because the only thing we could do as people is learn from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, if my experience in my theatrical world of setting up shows helps a screenwriter tell their story, then I feel like I'm paying it forward. So
that is awesome.
You're a very accomplished voiceover artist, and you've got this work where you've read James Patterson, other pieces of your places where you can hear your work there. My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that author's name. The Baseball 100.
Yeah.
Menakem, thank you. The Baseball 100 by Joe Posnanski. Did I get that right? Please tell me I got it right.
Yep, you did.
Good.
Nice.
So, thank you. I can be taught. Anyway, so there's a couple of questions coming out of this. Since you had this wealth of experience with all of it, what is a good story to you?
First and foremost, something I learned from. Yeah, those are the best ones. I feel like I've come away smarter. Also, it's interesting that we're talking about this, because it's funny how that question just hit my ear, because it makes me think about critical race theory, which is the big hot button topic. And even though most people have no idea what it means, and it's really reserved for second, third year law students. But really, just talking about what, how we look at history and telling the actual stories of things that have happened in this country, and how that just gets muddled. And I think every book that comes my way, like even in fiction, you can learn some things in fiction, and that's great. But I do love nonfiction, especially biographies, or especially histories, which leads into the state must provide. I'm talking about historically Black colleges and universities.
I actually started reading that book, and it's so much more. That book specifically is so much more than.
And that's the point. It's
just talking about the inequality. It really is like
the history.
Yes, yeah, and it was really interesting to figure out. Like I found it interesting that a lot of the early schools were set up to, as education, like to teach teachers, like to prep people to be teachers. And I was like, well, that sort of makes sense, because you're gonna, if we are seriously looking at a world of true equality, then you need people that have come from every background to teach everybody else. But yeah, it's a great book. I totally, I'm going to put the link up there because I think everybody should read it. But yeah, continue with your thought.
Yeah, and the majority of these schools were set up because after your primary school, elementary school, high school, that was, if you were even lucky to go that far, that was it, because it was illegal for Black folk to go to the same school as white folks who they had all the universities, all the flagship universities, University of Mississippi, University of Texas, of all these states. You weren't allowed to go there. So if you wanted to become a lawyer, there was nowhere for you to go. First of all, even getting into a college now, lawyering is further down the line, but there was no higher education institution for you.
Right.
So, and because they had this post-Reconstruction separate but equal, then they had to establish these all-Black colleges and universities for these students to go to. But even still, even if they went to these universities, again, if they wanted to become a lawyer or a doctor, these programs didn't exist in these universities. So they still had to end up looking toward the white universities where they were still barred from going. And that's when they started suing, because they were given meager resources to begin with.
Right.
But they did the very best they could with that, and they maxed out and excelled to the nth degree, but there was still a lack. There was still this lack. And that's why the NAACP had to get involved. And unfortunately, you had some people who, they just wanted to go to school. They didn't want to be the landmark case to help blow things open, because you have to understand, these cases took years. I'm talking 7, 8, 10. So that's 7, 8, 10 years out of these people's lives. And they're trying to enter a profession, they're just trying to get the individual to enter this profession. And, they're going, the NAACP, they got funding to help, but these people were going broke. They were getting death threats. It was a harried life experience to wake up every day to be threatened to be murdered just because you want to go to school. So, and it goes even, it talks about what happened in Little Rock, Arkansas, at Central High School, how they had to have the National Guardsmen on the scene to let these Black students into the school, and what it was like for them to have armed guards at the school to protect them every day. Because if they had left, there is a telling what would have happened to them.
Right.
So yeah, so it delves, and then just it goes into how historically underfunded, like the only places they can go, but how historically underfunded, and when the states that these HBCUs were, and then when it seemed as if they were going to win, it's like, okay, you have to let them go. What they would to like the University of, let's just say, of Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to study law here. So instead of letting them go to the campus itself, what they would do is hurry up and throw something together in the State House, like an office in the State House, and say, okay, here we have a graduate program right here in this office in the State House. I mean, it was an insult. It was like, so you've had this law school established for 100 years,
right,
on this campus, but in 30 days, you established something that's supposed to be equal, on par with this 100-year-old established institution in this State House, in an office in this State House, and I'm going to get equal education? Come on. So,
I mean, something that I think has definitely changed, and it's not great, it's not perfect. There's still so much more further that we need to go as far as equality in education. I think our accessibility to higher education is greater now than it's ever been because of being able to access education online.
Sure.
And it's a lot of these schools have paved the way to get that access across multiple generations and multiple economic stanchions, and it's I think it's actually, it's really cool because I feel like we're changing, especially with all of the protests and all of the absolutely horrible things that are going on in our country. I think it's actually going to be pushing us towards a more inclusive society. But I want to make sure that we don't forget everything that it took to get to this point, because I feel like those are the stories that we need to tell, and we need to always continue to tell, because that famous historical quote, like, unless we realize what history is, we're doomed to repeat it. So, I definitely think there's room for change, but I think we have come a long way.
And we can't let these HBCUs die either.
Right.
And they are, because they're closing down because they don't have the backing of deep pocketed alumni, as the flagship white universities of all these states have.
And then there's something to be said about having a culture at that school that you will not find anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like there may be one
and that's
fraternity or sorority
universities.
house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And in these universities, you have this rich cultural tradition and just beautiful cultural tradition. And every college has that. And certainly HBCUs also do that. I mean, to the point that today, and this is something we learned through the course of finding out about the fact that you narrated this book by Adam Harris, The State Must Provide, that there are 107 HBCUs in the U.S. The fact that we're getting this information out here, so many people who don't know this kind of information, the fact that inclusivity is breathing more life into the idea of getting more people aware. I mean, that's translating pretty well into, I think, and probably, and there's still so much ground to cover, well beyond, my lifetime, more than likely. In terms of bringing that into the entertainment world, it makes sense that writers are supposed to mirror this world in which we live, that it comes from a diverse background, so that we'll actually see true diversity. And you actually narrated another book that follows along that trend of inclusivity. that translates into the film world, the book called Colorization. And what that book represents in terms of that, it comes from its subtitle, 100 Years of Black Films in a White World. So in that experience of that, you mentioned learning something different from every book, including the nonfiction books. In this one, what did you learn? And as a supplemental question, how does this affect a truly universal idea of telling the story?
Okay. So I actually wanted to make this tie-in. Black Panther, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
He went to Howard University, historically Black college university. Originally to be a director, but then and because he had such a keen directing eye, he ended up going into acting. And now Chadwick Boseman, he was known globally because of Black Panther, right? But he's also portrayed these iconic figures: Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, Jackie Robinson. That means so much, not just to the Black community, but globally, global icons. And to think that not that long ago, and I would just say right before Black Panther, there was this prevailing thought that you could not have a film of all Black people or predominantly Black people because it just wouldn't sell, especially overseas. And we've seen the numbers that Black Panther has done and has debunked that myth thoroughly. But we even look at the beginnings. Like I don't know how many people know. Basically the father of Black cinema in this country is widely considered to be Oscar Micheaux. And what a fascinating life he's led. He decided from the Midwest, but he decided he wanted to be a frontiersman. So he moved out to Montana, or was it South Dakota? It was maybe South Dakota. And he learned how to be a frontiersman. Now you have to think about it. It was the 1915, so to be a Black man out there in South Dakota was something else, living off the lay of the land. It was crazy. And he had written books, and then he had decided that he wanted to turn he had written a story about his life, because he thought, hey, I'm probably one of the few Black men doing it like this. This will be interesting for people to read. So he wrote a book. He would go around and selling his book, and then he thought it'd be a great idea to turn his book into a story, into a movie. Especially you had Birth of a Nation, come out. And for those who don't know what that movie Birth of a Nation was, it was basically ballyhooing the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. So he wanted to have a movie that did not depict Black folks as criminal, larcenous, just all of the tropes that were prevalent during this time. And so he went to Chicago, and he found like this black director, black actor, like the most famous Black actor at the time. I can't remember his name. And he asked them if they would, help him make this movie, but they thought that it couldn't be done. They wanted to change it up too much for him. So he said, you know what, I'll do it myself. And so he found some players out in Chicago, and he was able to make this movie. And then he took it around to different theaters himself. He would drive around the country with his movie, with his reel, and and that's how he would get his movie shown throughout these theaters. He was like the first like true indie filmmaker,
Right. Yeah.
and hustling to do it, but that was the only way it could be done. Now, and that's what he would do for the rest of his life. He ended up going broke, and I mean, because he was so dogged in his pursuit, and there just were so few lanes for him. Because he wanted to showcase Black people in a true light and not in a stereotypical light. And then during this time, we have Hattie McDaniel, who was in Gone with the Wind,
Mm-hmm.
and she ended up winning an Oscar,
Right.
for playing a maid. Now, when it debuted in Atlanta, Georgia, she was not allowed to go to the red carpet event. Why? I think we know why.
Yeah.
Because they did not
Pretty
allow.
clear, sadly, given the city.
Right. So she wasn't even allowed to attend this movie event, in which she was nominated and eventually won the Oscar for, becoming the first Black person to win an Oscar in a movie. And I got to tell you, her life wasn't the same after that, and not for good reasons, because there was a large part of the Black community that excoriated her for playing this maid character,
Right.
and advancing these stereotypical tropes about us. And so it was rough for her. She thought that and she was really trying to be a legitimate actress, but she thought that winning this Oscar would help bolster her career, and it did the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And to put a button on Howard University, eventually they ended up, she gave her Oscar to Howard University, right? So they can have it on display. And one year somebody broke in and stole it, because people were in an uproar that they had it. Yeah, they broke in and they stole it, and it was never found.
Oh wow. I didn't know that.
That is, that's shameful.
Yeah. And this book, Colorization in particular, it showed really just all the things that we're looking at today. The fight to have more representation in TV and films. Those who got preferential treatment were of lighter skin.
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy Dandridge, Harry Belafonte. They were the ones. Sidney Poitier was an outlier, but Sidney Poitier was considered not dangerous. He was, quote unquote, well spoken. He was always well dressed. He wasn't considered a threat.
Do you think that's different in today's society? Do you think that the image of a person is as important as it was, 20 years ago?
There's still that undercurrent of colorism and the perception of there being danger when it comes to a darker skinned individual as opposed to a lighter skinned individual. That's still prevalent. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even if you think about you think about Sidney Poitier's movies, he was the first really to be opposite of a white woman in movie movie scenes. And so in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, they just did a little peck on the lips. Do you know the outrage that caused?
Yeah, it was crazy.
It was crazy.
Oh man, and that's pervasive too, especially across the time period that was in. That was the 60s when that movie opened, where there was a lot of, these civil rights changes, these changes that, I wonder if the leaders of those civil rights movements, the March on Washington, all of that, how they'd feel about things that are going on nowadays, the basic human rights protests we've recently seen, Black Lives Matter movement, Stop Asian Hate, women's rights protests. I mean, a lot of this, people say it's bubbled up to the surface, but that's, that's self-congratulatory in some ways with lighter skinned individuals, because we're talking about, it was always there. It hasn't changed. It's just
Right.
there's it's almost seismological in how much the crests and the valleys of the wave, seem to be happening more and more and reverberating even more and more. I mean, yeah, we could say we've got movies like The Help and Hidden Figures, which is one of my favorite movies because I'm a big fan of any movie that talks about space exploration or the people that try to do something about it. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and about like, why hasn't this story been told, which is a dumb question and easily the dumbest question I've ever asked, because it's pretty obvious, sadly, that's out there. But now we've got the added.
It was years in the making. That
right.
They had that ready to go years ago, but they were told that no one would have any interest. And I forget what her name is, and this is actually in the book. It was a white woman producer, and she held on to it. She saw what it was.
Mm-hmm.
She saw what it was, and she stumped to make sure that it got done. But it took years.
So there's this old trope in writing that you should write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I write historical fiction, and one of my favorite periods is the Civil War. So I write a lot about slavery and people getting out of slavery and people being indentured for the rest of their lives because they were scared to run. I mean, that's something I definitely don't know anything about, but do you feel, and you totally don't have to answer this, but do you feel like it's something that anybody can access those emotions and thoughts, or access? Yeah, I can talk today. But do you feel like it would be coming better from a Black writer, or do you feel like there's something that I can never completely understand, and so it's just better to leave it to?
Okay, so I'll give you.
You know what I mean?
I'll give you an example. I'm whiffing on some names too. A white director was going to direct, and a fabulous one at that, was going to direct Malcolm X, starring Denzel Washington. Spike Lee wrote, like, he went nuts, and he was like, no. They had a conversation, and he was like, no, this is not your story to tell.
Right.
Spike Lee went in there because it was a definitely different story. So he went in there, got the script, rewrote it, and then we had an Oscar-nominated film. And if you've seen Malcolm X, you know how powerful of a movie that was.
It's a great movie.
And obviously, Denzel being Denzel did everything he did.
Right.
But and then ultimately it lost to what? Scent of a Woman. Anyway, but that's a whole nother sector of the book that discusses that. But yeah, there's just a frequency, right? Here's a funny one. In White Men Can't Jump, Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson have this scene together when they're talking about jazz. Like, yeah, you can't hear Coltrane. It's like, what do you mean I can't hear Coltrane? I can hear Coltrane. Like, no. You listen to Coltrane, but you can't hear him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm coming from.
I do believe there is that frequency, right? That from the lived-in experience that can't be attained unless you have lived in that experience in that particular skin.
Yeah.
You can tell a beautiful story, but there's going to be a different feel to it when it comes from a lived-in experience point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I totally agree.
And there's something to be said for wanting to try that, though. I mean, you're not going to hear how many people want to try to tell a story and where their lead character is of a different skin than the writer's is. Just trying to do that. Now, the reasons for that obviously are exceptionally different. coming from my own perspective as a flagellating fanboy, forgive me, there's a lot we can learn from the movie Alien right
Mm,
up front, because the beautiful thing about Alien is that there's two things. It got away from the trope, or the trope that's still, unfortunately, after the film was released, is still pervasive in horror movies, about the fate of a dark-skinned individual, about, you know, how they tend to be the first one that is cleared out, which of course Jordan Peele's blown the hell out of completely, right? And taken
yes.
just a beautiful direct horror in a beautiful direction. But with
Yes.
Alien, all of those characters were originally written without any idea of what gender or skin color they were at all. They were fairly stock and generic. It was a B movie script with that kind of, you know, wide open field, right? So
Mhm.
inevitably, I mean, at the end of the movie, you got Yafet Kodo, who just
Yeah,
kicks so much ass in that movie.
we did.
And I wish he'd survived. I wish this character survived.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, him and Ripley are the ones who are the you know, he, unfortunately, I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it, you know, if they're listening, but Ripley is the survivor, but the two of them being the last ones, just, it says so much about how forward thinking that movie is to, you know, comes across in many ways, even
Yes.
from its behind the scenes stages.
Yes. Yeah,
And that was
absolutely.
done, I think, without any like intent for that, really.
Right. And you have to understand, like, as a black viewer, you're rooting. You're rooting for
Mhm.
Yaphet Kotto, no doubt.
Yeah.
But and to
Yeah,
also
absolutely, and you should be.
but to see him make it that far, you're amazed
Yeah.
because you just didn't see that. You know what I mean? It just wasn't anything that you really saw that happen too often. And that Alien came on the tail end of the 70s, right? So
Mhm.
Yeah.
a particular thing happened in the 70s that has been called the black exploitation films, which is an unfortunate naming for something that was truly magnificent in cinema. Um, and I want to give Melvin Van Peebles, who just recently passed away, R.I.P. a shout out, because when he came out with his movie, Sweet Badass Song, he was another one in the Oscar Michaud mold who took his movie on the road, and he went to, first of all, he the hoops he had to jump through to make this movie were incredible. He wanted to make a movie with a black protagonist, superhero type character who didn't take no shit from quote unquote the man, uh, and just got to live life his way. Um, he was kicking ass, kicking cops' ass, because we're talking about coming off the heels of the Black Power movement
Right.
and civil rights leaders being killed and or jailed, or all sorts of things, police brutality and the whole situation. So he wanted to show a character who fought back against the system and won. Uh, and he couldn't get the backing from Hollywood executives because they didn't understand the film. They were like, I don't get this. Nope. So what he did instead is he got some actors, some B list, whatever, anyone he could afford, and the way he got around union rules like paying SAG and all that is he said it was going to be an X-rated film. So if it was going to be an X-rated film, then you can circumvent a lot of the SAG rules. So that's
Wow.
what he did.
I wonder if that's still true.
I don't know. You should look into it.
Well,
I'm
and
gonna look
of
into
course,
that.
well,
And
and we,
so
well, great. Now we got to figure out how to make an X-rated movie these days when the X rating doesn't really even exist technically.
So then he needed music for the film, but he had run out of money. But this group from the Midwest agreed to do it for free because they were coming out as a band themselves, and so they agreed to add all the music and do all the things. So no one wanted to pick it up, so he decided to go to the blackest cities that there were. So he went to Detroit, and he went straight to the radio station, and he said, "Hey, this movie is going to be the best movie you've ever seen." Da 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 da. And then also it's featuring music from this band, and the band who worked on his music for free as they were coming out was Earth, Wind, and Fire, and this
Oh,
is
wow.
making their
Yes.
song. And so Earth, Wind, and Fire had just dropped a single that was killing the charts. And so he said, "Oh yeah, and this music is in the movie." So people went to this one movie house that agreed to take on the movie, and they filled the seats. And what happened? The next day, everyone called their relatives. "Hey, you got to come check this movie out."
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
they packed the house. It was there for 3 days. They packed it out. It set records for that particular movie house. So then he took the film, went down because he was trying to call movie theaters, they were shutting them down. He called Houston, it was New York, shut him down. Philly, shut him down. He was able to get to Atlanta. He did the same thing to it in Atlanta. He went to the movie station. He went to the radio station first, let them know. Atlanta turned out, and then word of mouth, word of mouth, word of mouth. So he was setting box office records, like in these movie houses, these movie theaters were just breaking house records. So of course, no matter where you sit, no matter how you feel about the person, what talks? Money. So all of a sudden, these white movie theater owners were like, "Well, wait a minute. What's this movie you said? What is this?" So in Houston, they said, "All right, go ahead, bring your movie, but we have to start the showings at midnight." It was like, "I don't care." Guess what? People still came out in force. Then it opened in New York, and then all of a sudden it's opening up in all these different places, right? It just showed the power of the Black community coming out, the Black movie-going community coming out in force, which was overlooked by the white executives at these huge movie studios. They didn't consider us. They didn't think about us at all, ever. So they saw what happens when we come out in force to support. And then all of a sudden, you see more of these movies start to come to the fore. And that's how Shaft was able to then come out. And then Shaft was a huge success. And then you get Superfly. And then you had this one guy, unfortunately, he termed it blaxploitation, I think, because it didn't fit what he thought the roles that Black folks should be playing. It was a Black dude who termed it. It was a congressman of some sort. And he was just, he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He didn't get what was happening. And so he took it as an affront when really it was a beautiful celebration. So then everyone was trying to cash in on the quote unquote blaxploitation films. And so then you got a ton of stinkers, but the ones that really resonated with people, those were just really good films. We got some beautiful actors, performers who came out of that. Obviously, Pam Grier being one of them. But yeah, so it had its run, but because it was termed blaxploitation, it made it very niche and it made it like a negative connotation. So it only lasted like through the 70s. What it did do was break out some stars that then went on to, become forces in the 80s and 90s. But it was still, once that era passed, then you went back to, the chokehold where you only got certain roles and only certain, the reality is like, only one or two of us can break at a time. Not all,
Right.
And that held still for like Lou Gossett Jr. was around for all of it. And he was like, yeah, you would have thought I would have broken out a long time ago. His biggest thing was to that point, Roots. And he said, yeah, after Roots, I thought I could write my own ticket. Nope. A lot of people thought that.
It's kind of interesting that that both the people that we've talked about, Mario and I'm gonna forget the other guy's name, Oscar.
Oscar Michaud.
Yeah, that they both had a similar story where there was like this fight in them, you know, to get out, to get their own work
And that
out.
story, and that story is actually pretty pervasive. I mean, there was a recent movie that ran last year. Eddie Murphy played Rudy Ray Moore, and his story about how My Name is Dolomite on Netflix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of Eddie Murphy's best movies, because the great thing is that it showed everything you're describing, although it was, and Dolomite was, I guess, depending upon who you are, you might take it as a crude movie or a cultural revolution.
Sure.
But it was still that idea that Rudy Ray Moore was an entrepreneur, as was Melvin Van Peebles.
Mm-hmm.
And to the likes to which a cultural movement that led to all these ripple effects of years later, it was an inspiration. And honestly, the big takeaway from that for independent film and how it informed it is you can't take anything for granted. These folks are taking nothing for granted, and they're working harder than anyone else to try to get their stories out there, to get them distributed, to get them made. And I mean, it gets celebrated in some ways. I don't know. One of my favorites that technically celebrates it, but I don't know if everyone feels the same. John Ridley, hell of a writer. His concept Flash animated show called Undercover Brother, it became a movie. I love that movie, and it was very much a Valentine to that 70s era.
I love Undercover Brother. I love it, and I encourage people. I saw when it first came out, and then I saw it again. I would say maybe 3 years ago, and when I looked at it again, I was like, "Man, this movie is brilliant." You know, I mean, it's just for what, you know, like the jokes, like the writing was really smart, and if you get the references, man, illuminating. Yeah, no, that's a great one. That's a great one.
Yeah,
and
so
it tells
basically,
us all something about.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And it tells us all something, you know, there's so much there that I mean, it's nothing if you don't look behind it and look historically at it as well. Just like, where is it coming from? What is the source of this? And, you know, look behind what came before there. Cause you got a great historical capsule in the very beginning of the titles of that movie, as a matter of fact. So pretty good when it was like co-written by one of the co-writers of the Austin Powers movies. So that says a lot about that particular film.
Yes.
But I had the hardest time finding it on DVD here in Texas. That was a crazy thing. It's like I actually went out of my way to find it at a Blockbuster nobody would go to, and bought that movie because this was before Amazon and being able to buy it. And I'm like, because I loved that movie that much, and I still love it. I've shown my son that movie, and he loves it.
It's great. It's great. Yeah, but it's great in the fact that it's a jump off point for you to do the work to find out what these references mean, and then it'll lead you down, hopefully, down this rabbit hole of knowledge that is just there, which they were touching upon. Here's this. Here's these little golden nuggets for you, right? Here's these little Easter eggs for you. Now it's on you to go look it up. I like to call them Googleable moments.
And they are. As a matter of fact, that's perfect, because if anything, if you are an entertainer, you become a student of that craft. You become a student of either acting, screenwriting. In the general, I consider myself a student of cinema, and that means that's an exposure of all the cultures that cinema comes from. So it no longer becomes work. It becomes this cultural immersion that you get to explore. And that's what's so great about this. This is a cultural watershed that is just this. There's so much fun stuff in it that's entertaining, and how someone would want to ignore it, I have a hard time fathoming, even though it's kind of obvious why, and sadly obvious. But that's what's the beauty of it. You can learn so much from it. Louis Gossett Jr. is a great example. This is a guy who took nothing for granted afterwards, and now, I mean, he was in one of my favorite science fiction films ever, and his performance is fantastic. Enemy Mine, great performance, and
great movie.
Great movie.
And I actually ties right to the heart of prejudicial race, well, not race issues, but definitely prejudice itself on an intergalactic scale. And the
Yeah.
best science fiction really makes us take a look at society in that way.
I'm actually really excited to see what all of our young filmmakers are doing out on the streets today. I'm excited to see what they're going to come up with and the way they're going to tell the stories of what's happening now. I've seen, just a couple that I follow on social media, and there's a real specific voice that is growing louder, and the way they are able to tell these stories with such empathy and class is for me really cool to see. And I just hope that we're going to have this year, and then unfortunately, like the way these trends go, like 5 years from now, then we'll see it on the big screen. But it's got to start from somewhere, and I think with all the technology we have, that just taking your phone and going out onto the street and start recording, whatever it is, it's an interview, you're talking to somebody, it's just visual. Like, you are creating these stories that nobody's ever seen before because it's a new world,
And there should be no barriers for anyone, especially, I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, with someone that has that voice, and since the technology is democratized, it's very clear we're going to get our next John Singleton or Gordon Parks, or
Yep.
I mean, hell, Mario Van Peebles kept on the tradition from his father, and now that next generation after him is certainly, it's going to continue. Ryan Coogler has taken the Rocky franchise into a great direction with Creed, and certainly he's the director of Black Panther, and what he did with that franchise, and just showed us this great world that anybody was accessible to anybody, and that's the beauty of and the power of what entertainment can be.
Yeah, I mean, we have Barry Jenkins. We have these guys out there, and also here's the thing too. I hope that Black creatives, filmmakers, TV writers, and forward get the same opportunities to fail. I've seen that there's this thing called failing upward, where you'll have, there've been like a lot of white filmmakers who have made dud after dud after dud after dud, but they've been allowed to fail, and then they hit something. They hit on something. Whereas the experience for a lot of Black filmmakers, Hispanic filmmakers, they've made a movie that it didn't meet expectations, and then they couldn't get another movie financed again. A prime example of it is the writer and director of Love Jones, which I love Love Jones, but Love Jones was one of those movies that was more of a slow burn. You had Neil Long and Lorenz Tate, who they didn't have, like, their star wasn't as high as it is now, but they were buzzing, especially in the Black community. And it also showcased an aspect of Black life that wasn't really shown on the big screen. And that was that, middle class. We went to school, we have our degrees, we hang out at lounges, we have get-together, it was just maybe we dress in cardigans. It was different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't Boys in the Hood. It wasn't, Menace to Society, which also great films, but it just was slanted toward one viewpoint. When not everybody comes from that. There were some people who grew up right up in the suburbs, and they got great educations. They had a great situation, and then they got a great corporate job, and this is what they did. And they had barbecues on the. They just did different things, but you didn't see that. You didn't see that. Like, these were the people who would have been on A Different World, And once they would have graduated from Hillman, then they would have went on, gotten a nice house and did the things. Well, we didn't see that in the movies, you know? We didn't see that.
That's what I'm saying about like use this new technology that we have that everybody has, walking around in their pocket and like
Sure.
tell me your story
Mhm.
because your story is unique. It's only from you.
Mhm.
And you have perspective that nobody else has. So, go out there and tell me your story. And then you can also learn to be a storyteller.
Mhm.
And we need that, obviously. And, we've said
We do.
ad nauseum about that, but and a question for you, Carrie, and perhaps this might be one of our last ones for the episode. Given everything that we've seen in these protest movements, all the recent unfortunate tragedies, but also the great amount of change that we're seeing, there's the real challenge of whether or not there's an actual change, because there's multiple levels on this. It's like, have things actually changed, or have things been better representative? And then on the other side of it, has it overtaken storytelling to the point that we're pushing an agenda rather than actually telling a story? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say this, and I'll say this from a commercial aspect. I don't go out for commercials as much as I used to anymore, but this was the thing. I knew if they wanted a couple, if it was girlfriend, boyfriend, couple, and I went into the room with the white actress, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to get this. Tell you what, we could have had a great audition. Then we get the call back, and then I may see her at the call back, but then she's paired up with a white dude that she hasn't worked with, and I'm paired up with a black actress that I haven't worked with. So we're looking at each other and it was like, well, we had fun and we did a great thing in there. So I guess, like, I won't see you on set. So I guess good luck to you, but that means I won't get the job. And then good luck to me. That means you won't get the job. And so there was just a refusal to show in these commercials what real life was.
Right.
So then nowadays you look on commercials and you have representation of all kinds, right?
Yeah.
And so now you'll see blended families, and now LGBTQ is getting represented more. You see, but now it's just like how on Instagram that they'll just like, hey, here's my May photo dump. Now they're doing a photo dump of 2, 3, 6 decades. here's a photo dump of what life has looked like for decades in this country, right? So while there's a happiness that it's finally happening, it almost feels like it's backhanded to me, in a sense. It's what it's felt like, because this is what it's always been, but it's taken this push and this and this that, and now they feel as if, well, I better just throw this person and that person together, so I can't be seen as obtuse. I can't be seen as someone who's on the wrong side of history. So I feel like there are some companies who have been genuine in their realization of how things have been, and others who have just done it to save face, to say that I don't want to be named as one who is blind to what's going on. So, and I want to make sure that our revenue still stays what it is.
Agreed.
So there is it's not genuine in all of its forms. So I'm glad that it's finally happening, but at the same time, I'm still looking at them. I'm still looking at you, because I know a lot of you. I know which ones I went out for, and who were like, oh no, that wouldn't make sense. but now all of a sudden you can't see anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, you do have to go through these periods, right? When I had locks years ago, I was going out for shows, commercials, plays, and all that, and they're like, "Oh, you have locks," and I'm like, "Yep, it's hair. I have hair." I could still be a lawyer. I was purposeful. I was like, "Yeah, I could be a lawyer," because guess what? My locks don't stop my brain from learning. I could be a doctor, and I'll just
Right.
put it in. I'm going to do this to make sure that I don't, that my patient is okay. Like it's ridiculous though what they say you can't be because of a certain look. I ended up cutting my hair years ago, but because it was my time to do it, not because I felt pressured to do it. As soon as I cut my hair, then you saw the funkiest hairstyles all over the place.
Right.
I was like, now you can't see a black person without an afro or some funky hairstyle. And the dude from My Name is Earl, he came out with his humongous afro and he got cast on My Name is Earl because the producer saw him in a commercial and he said, "I love his hair." That was the reason. That was the little reason. And so you, unfortunately, you have to go through these cycles until you normalize, right? So now we're in the spin cycle until the clothes get dried out, and then it's like we're just back to now. And it's like, is everyone figured it out yet? We're good now. Everything's fine. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm happy to finally see it. They're definitely like jamming it down the throat, but okay, I get it. So then it'll self-correct to the point where it's okay. It's just normal. Like it doesn't have to be this in every single spot. It's okay to see just the white family. It's fine. It's all right. You can do that. Because guess what? There's still just a lot of white families out there. You could just have a plain old white family, a plain old black family, a plain old Latino family. You could just have just a plain, uniform set. Not everyone is blended, but there are some who are. So yeah, so inclusivity means that everyone is getting a seat at the table. It doesn't necessarily have to be all blended, does it? But just representation matters. Like, don't hold me out because of, but I don't need to see myself in every single spot.
Right.
But you know what? When you've been held out for so long, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna have my,
Yep, I want it all.
Yeah. So if you
and rightly so. Yeah. I mean, and that's the trick of it in terms of entertainment. There's no such thing as balance of inclusivity. I think that's arguable to an extent. I think I don't mean that it's imbalanced in one favor of the other, because we're still talking about commercialism either way, right? Yeah. So that's a very tricky and scary statement to make, to be honest, especially, because storytelling is supposed to be about universality, but that doesn't always necessarily mean something that's balanced. I just liken it to this. Just don't be heavy-handed and shove an agenda down my throat. Tell me a universal story that I can get behind, that attracts me, that makes me want to see it. Because everything you're describing is almost the same problem screenwriters have. You're gonna run into that situation where you're fighting the trends to the point that you make this trivial assumption that you do need to follow trends, and then by the time you've written to one, that trend is gone.
Yeah. So just stick to real life.
So it's never a good idea to be.
Real life will be your teacher.
Yeah.
Real life will show you every single time.
Yep.
And if you just and if you're up on the times, then you'll see what it is, and it'll inform your story, and then your story will be true because you'll have real people to fit your world that you want to have people explore. You'll find the right people because they're right there. And you can just plug here. Oh, I need this. I need you, you, and you, because you tell my story the best.
Yes.
That's it.
That's the way it should always be.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do normally talk about news toward the end of our episodes, but I don't have anything.
I kind of think we've hit the mark with that.
We've hit the mark, yeah.
Because everything we're talking about is prescient and topical.
Yeah. So, words of wisdom?
Yeah, Denise, don't you have some words of wisdom this time? If not, I certainly do.
I do, but mine's funny, and it feels like such a weird thing to do after all our serious conversation.
Well, and if you why don't we do both and see how they fly? Because honestly, I think this has been a great conversation, and I want to, Carrie, thank you for this and the opportunity to talk with you about a subject like this. And it felt like a great conversation about so much that was cultural and certainly from your professional experience.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great. It's been great to catch up with you too, Denise, and
thank you,
and to commune, with both of you in this manner. I mean, this is what, there's a lot of things that are kooky about the internet, but this isn't one of them. This is actually
Thank God.
where you can see what it could be and the good that can come from it.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about it off air, but one of the things that I wanted to do with this is that Chris and I come from completely different backgrounds, but we are still storytellers, and we can align ourselves with the fact that we are learning how to tell the best story out there. And I think that's something that is like a thread, you know what I mean? Like, we as people can all find something in common with someone else.
Sure.
No matter who that person is.
Oh, that's your words of wisdom.
It wasn't. Do you want to hear my words of wisdom?
Yeah, you go. And
my
then
words
I'll give
of
you mine.
wisdom. Okay. I like to bake, so this is a foodie one. Cupcakes are muffins that believed in miracles.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. See, I mean, it was a little lighthearted for a heavy subject.
Especially since. But beneficial, because honestly, I mean, when you think about something coming together and creating something that's positive, I mean, baking, cooking, as we're about to do coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday, that's a constructive act. It's not a destructive one. So I think there's a value in that.
Well, I mean, it's destructive to potatoes and turkeys. I'm sorry, I had to go there.
We didn't have to go there, Denise. You really just, man, you brought it down.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, potatoes.
Well, may I deliver my?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, and all the turkeys are going. Let me give my departing words of wisdom, though. And a quick story on this, and Carrie, you might appreciate that. Appreciate this. Years ago, I attended University of North Texas, and one of the first extracurricular organizations on campus was an organization of burgeoning students who were African American, as they wanted to be designated at the time. This was 1994, I believe, 1995, and it was an association of these guys who were trying to make movies. They were already in the radio, television, film program there, and their program they allowed all walks of life in. It was very inclusive, and I just happened to go because it was the only one that existed outside of the program for people to learn how to make film. But it was a place to go to talk with other people about film before I even got into a film class. One of the first things they showed was The Giving Tree by Gordon Parks.
Yes.
And his quote is what I'm bringing up today, because I was that seeing The Giving Tree really had an impact on me at that time. His quote is, "Enthusiasm is the electricity of life. How do you get it? You act enthusiastic until you make it a habit." And I think that has value on what we've been talking about today.
Absolutely.
Yes, go out there and make it happen.
I love that.
Absolutely.
And while you're going out there, go.
I'm sorry, even if it's baking cupcakes, I really wanted to give your departing words of wisdom value.
Thank you. Second place. I'll take second place on words of wisdom.
Yeah,
it's so
competitive.
Look, man, the Giants. The Giants are losing. Penn State is losing. It's just been an off year for me. I'm sorry.
We got rid of Jason Garrett, so we'll see what happens.
I know. Oh, that was so shocking.
A former Cowboy, and consequently, the Cowboys are doing well right now. So I don't know. It's all backwards.
I couldn't hear you.
I'll be honest. I thought y'all would beat the Chiefs, but I heard a offensive lineman, Leo Collins, tried to bribe a COVID-19 tester to get
what?
Yes, he did.
Oh wow! I have to go read that story.
He tried to bribe him to get a vax card.
Oh,
big D.
Yeah.
At it again.
While you're out there reading, see, we're just gonna gloss over this. So while Chris is, contemplating the future of his team, and the rest of us are out there making things happen. Remember to follow all the links in this episode. They will take you to books, they'll take you to IMDb, and they'll take you to Amazon. Definitely read these books. They are great. You can follow Carrie on Audible and listen to all his, caramel voice kind of storytelling. I was like, I think one of the first things I told you when we met like 10 years ago, I was like, man, your voice is like caramel. And then you could also follow this podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, all at Telling the Show. You can email us, tellingtheshow@gmail.com. And again, thank you to all our new followers, and keep spreading the word because, we love you guys.
Awesome. Thanks again, y'all.
Thanks so much, Carrie. We appreciate you having you on.
Nice. Now I got to run to rehearsal.
Okay. All right. If we don't see everybody
before
then, happy holidays to all.
Absolutely. Happy holidays to everybody.
Indeed. All right.